So you have to have a language in the region of Egypt. It has to be at the time of the earlier Israelites, if we're going to believe in the 1400 BC, 1450 BC Exodus, according to 2 Kings. If you find all those different connections, and then it has to be a form of writing like Hebrew, and then it has to, the big idea is it's alphabetic, because the Hebrew language is an alphabetic language. And guess what? This film uncovers all four of those major ideas that are there. And it's, it becomes the basis of all, alphabetic languages that then goes around the world. And the biggest idea for me was this, I take it a step further, but I see a connection, and maybe it's because I'm a person of faith. I see a connection between needing to have something that is transferable, right? Doesn't it say, write these, Moses, is told to tell the people to write these commands on their doorposts and teach them to their children. Mm-hmm. So if a writing system was so complicated that you would be hard to learn in hieroglyphics and cuneiform, that's those two ancient writing systems in that place of the world, were very, very difficult. They'd be 1,000 to 1,200 characters, so people couldn't, learn them. But all of a sudden, something comes along at the time in history and the place that matches the story of the Israelites, and guess what? It's transferable. I think that's the beauty of what this is about. It reveals its transferableness. The ideas that were given at Mount Sinai, teaching the laws and all these things, are transferable.
Now, you've raised a really interesting question. So first of all, I just got to put out there that phrase about write them on your doorposts. I take that to be a metaphor. But the very fact that you would have a metaphor related to the common person writing suggests that maybe the common person was at least literate. And that's really interesting, because Professor Goldwasser, who, and I don't want to focus just on, I don't mean to pick on her, but scholars in general will say, well, wait a minute, you're speculating here. And then they go and they speculate with speculations that are far more, what's the word I'm looking for, that are very impossible to prove. So one of her statements, and this is a quote, is, so she talks about the invention of this Proto-Semitic, right, which she believes is a Northwest Semitic language and not necessarily, or not Hebrew, because Hebrew didn't exist according to her. Okay, fine. I'm going to call it Proto-Hebrew. She calls it Proto-Semitic. She says, my inventor or inventors were illiterate. In other words, the standard explanation of Proto-Semitic is that it was someone who was educated, and that he took a form of hieroglyphics and he turned it into an alphabetic system. And you actually said, I won't give this part away, but you have a really intriguing suggestion that comes from David Rohl in your movie. I won't give that one away. But she's suggesting, no, this was invented by some common person. And she has no proof for that. Could be. It's very possible. And I actually think she's probably right. And I want to give some analogies. So we have a modern analogy to a man named Sequoyah, who in the 1810s and 1820s, in a period of about 20 years, invented a written writing system. He was a man illiterate who came from a pre-literate society, the Cherokee. And he took the Cherokee language and he invented a writing system. Now, he didn't invent symbols. He did exactly what Proto-Semitic did, if you believe the standard explanation, right? In other words, what Sequoyah did is he took letters from the English alphabet and the Greek alphabet, and he actually didn't know what they represented in the English or Greek alphabet, and he assigned them values in the Cherokee language. And he produced a syllabic alphabet based on syllables, not consonants and vowels. So the Cherokee character may have a completely different sound than it does in English or Greek, because Sequoyah didn't know English or Greek, and he invented a writing system. And this is actually the only example known in history where we've witnessed a pre-literate society becoming literate within a single generation. Within about 20 or 30 years, the average Cherokee was reading a daily newspaper. Imagine that. They went from a pre-literate society to reading a daily newspaper in a period of a few decades. They had a written constitution. They had written laws in a very short period of time. And the theory is that Sequoyah he was a silversmith, and that he would write down symbols initially. This is a theory, we don't know, but it's believed he wrote down symbols to indicate to people, okay, this was the silver brought to me by so-and-so, let me give him a symbol. and he experimented with different symbols until he invented a writing system. So why couldn't that have happened with Proto-Sinaitic from the Israelites? They saw these Egyptian symbols, and they said, oh, that looks like water. In Hebrew, water is mayim, or in our Northwest Semitic dialect. The word for water is mayim or mem or something like this. And they used that symbol to represent the ma sound, right? And they saw a pillar, and they said a pillar is samech, somech, it holds something else, holds something up. And so they drew a very primitive picture of a pillar for the sa sound, for samech. If that happened with Sequoia, that surely could have happened with these Egyptian or these Semitic slaves. Here's what it's indisputable. Semitic slaves in a turquoise mine in Sinai wrote a Northwest Semitic language, which absolutely could be Hebrew, right? The last part, scholars may not agree with. They'll say it can't be Hebrew because it's an anachronism, but linguistically, it could be Hebrew. That's really exciting to me, that there was some ancient Sequoia who maybe wasn't in that Egyptian mine. Maybe it was somebody 100 or 200 years before. We really don't know. All we know is when we have the earliest form of this writing, and even the dating of that is a bit speculative. So
I agree with you. I think that what we talked about it here is that there could have been a genius that this revelation of taking phonetics, but someone who is familiar with Egyptian hieroglyphs, and you have to see the film because it shows you the connection between Egyptian hieroglyphs and this early language that then someone modifies it. But guess what? Then that would have been passed on to the Israelite people, and they would have had their own phonetic written language, and that would have become the basis. And then when they went into slavery, they still knew how to write.